Greetings. Welcome to Writers on Writing. This Medgar Evers College radio show is paid for by Medgar Evers College. I am your host, Dr. Brenda Greene. I am director of the Center for Black Literature and director of the National Black Writers Conference. Writers on Writing comes to you every Sunday and gives you, our listening audience, an opportunity to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work, their lives, and their craft. And I am so pleased and excited to have with me a very special guest, a musician, a lyrical poet, Talib Kweli, who has come out with his memoir, and we're going to be discussing it. So welcome, Talib.
I think you undersold that a little bit. I think you skipped out some parts about our relationship.
Yes, a very, very important artist. And of course, Talib Kweli, my son, my eldest
Yes.
son.
What's up,
And
Mom?
that was going to come out sooner. But that'll
Well,
come out in the interview.
okay, cool. Well, first off, I like the show a lot.
You know, I'm just so excited about your book. And I've read it a couple of times. Vibrate Higher.
Yes, well, you're in
And
it. You're a star
yes,
of the book.
well, I want to, and I see that you dedicated it to your mother and father, and
Mhm.
that was just very heartwarming. But you know, one of the things I like about the book, and when I describe it, is that this is your memoir, a slice of your life. But it's also a book that focuses on your worldviews, your views on politics, on activism. It focuses on your personal life. It really combines on hip hop, on music. There's so much packed into this book, and it's beautifully written. And we're going to come back to why Vibrate Higher. But what I'd like to hear from you is, how did the things in your background, what you came up with, help to shape your worldview and your philosophy?
Well, for me, that's everything. In my mind, who are we but a collection of our memories and the memories that we create? And this is what we leave in the world and allows us to live beyond uh, how long our bodies live. You know, our bodies age and decay and we pass away, but our legacies live on because of our memories and the people who remember us and our words and our deeds and things we put into this world. And so I learned very early from my parents that experiences are valuable, that family is valuable, that community is valuable, and not so much shiny things or money. Um, and so when I look at the world through that lens, well, it only makes sense that I'm shaped by all these things. I'm not. I'm always been a team player. That's why my music has always been about groups. It's always been Talib Kweli and High Tech, Talib Kweli and Most Def, Talib Kweli and Styles P, Talib Kweli and Diamond D is my new project. Um, I always like to acknowledge what makes me me. Even in making my records, even if the record just has my name on it, there's always a team of people that goes into making that record. And so when I wrote the book, it couldn't just be about this happened to me, and I. It had to be everyone's story. It had to be the story of my parents. It had to be the story of their parents. It had to be the story of Brooklyn. It had to be the story of Park Slope. It had to be the story of Rubik's and Juju and John Forte and and all these people that I took time to say, well, this is where they came from. And it also had to be the story of the music, of why certain songs meant so much to me, um, things like that.
Well, you talk a lot about the collective, the collectivism.
Mhm.
And you know, I notice anytime I've seen you perform, if there's someone, one of the artists, you know, if they're in the city, they're going to be on the stage with you.
Mhm.
And I see that. You know, I don't go to many hip hop shows, but that's something you've been very deliberate and intentional about. You always had many people around you. You talk, as you know, you're embodying that collective spirit, you know, collective responsibility and the creative arts. But there are some other things that, you know, you talk about us, your father and I and your
Mhm.
family, but there are some points that come out in your work that really reflect what you have incorporated into your music. And I did not think about it until I began to write my own memoir. When you talk about the Black liberation movement, you talk about cultural arts, I thought about the fact that your father and I intentionally chose the first school to be an Afrocentric school, Wayusi Shule. That was your first school. The names we gave you, these are elements that help to form your consciousness.
Absolutely.
And so I just wanted you to, and then what was really interesting, what did you do when your children became of age? You put them in the same school. So I wanted you to talk a little bit more about why that was so important to you, to be so deliberate and so intentional about these elements that were part of your worldview, and that are reflected in your music.
I think, representation is so important. And a large part of my self-esteem and my self-awareness and how I value myself is rooted in those Afrocentric, Black cultural nationalist images and activities. And understanding, the first time I got called a nigger by a white kid, I was able to put it into some sort of historical context. And I think that helped me as a young man, because I already knew some things from what my parents taught me. And
living in this world in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, but some people get, you can live in Brooklyn and be shielded from it as a child, depending on your experiences or your parents' experiences. And so, yeah, I just think that is such a part of everything. It's informed my proximity to, you know, the culture of Black people, particularly Black Americans. As I mean, it's everything. It's everything, and it's like it's tough sometimes. It's the type of artist I am, because it doesn't just inform my art; it informs my life. And as I get older, I think more about people like Seun Kuti, the son of Fela Kuti. He speaks a lot about moving away from this idea of Blackness and to talk about being African. And intellectually, I get that. We identify as Black because our experience historically is so splintered and scattered, and we don't know a large part of us. We don't know our history. So we collectively identify as Black people. We all have this global Black experience together, and so that's a beautiful thing. But I understand intellectually why there's even some limiting factors to calling ourselves Black. And so that's also something I'm wrestling with as I get older. Just in terms of how what language means, and how I'm gonna identify going forward. But certainly having those things as a child, those images, and you making sure that you took us to see Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon, and you took us to see, even though you didn't understand that world. And I remember you taking me to see School Days, even though you didn't really completely understand Spike Lee's vision. I remember being in junior high school and watching School Days, and you put your hand over my eyes at certain parts, because you knew that we had to see this Black creative doing this thing on the silver screen. You knew that was important. The representation was important. And that just made me feel like anything was possible.
But I also, you talk about how you're thinking moving forward, but there's definitely this whole international spin to the music you do and to the life you live. So you're out of Brooklyn, New York, but you have musicians who are from Africa, from the Caribbean, from Europe. It's definitely a worldview. Mm-hmm. I want to go into your writing. I introduced you as a lyricist, a strong lyricist, a musician, but you're also a poet. And this is Poetry Month. Okay. And so this would be perfect. So can you talk a little bit about how you, your craft, how do you go about writing music, writing lyrics, and to what extent does that tie to poets you may know?
When I first started writing hip hop lyrics, some of my earliest inspirations as far as content and style were poets from the Black Arts Movement, poets like Sonia Sanchez and Amiri Baraka and Gil Scott Heron and the Last Poets and Jane Cortez. And hearing those records and reading those words, I understood how hip hop was a part of that lineage early. And so that style of poetry made its way into my work fairly early as building blocks for my style of rap. Um, Rap was experiencing, hip hop was experiencing this sort of shift in consciousness when I got into it, and it was moving sort of in a direction where it's not just party music, but it's music that's to uplift the consciousness. And so artists that were popular at the time were KRS One and Rakim and Poor Righteous Teachers and X Clan and Paris and Rakim Shabazz and people who were leaning very heavily on a very black nationalist way of rap and 5% influence, Nation of Islam influence. Um, and then when I started to venture out of my safe space of my home neighborhood and go to Greenwich Village and see where art was happening in real time, I met and saw poets in the park doing a 90s version of what the Black liberation poets were doing, Black liberation movement poets were doing. I saw poets like Reggie Gaines and Medusa and 99 and people like that really taking it to new heights. And then those people were like a little bit older than me, but well, you know, there was Willie Perdomo, people like that. You know, those guys, Sekou Diata, those guys were a generation before me. But then people in my generation started doing it. Saul Williams, Mums the Schemer, Asha Bedele, Jessica Care Moore. And these are people who, when I was working at Incuba Books, became my friends. And so we were doing the same events together. The poets and the MCs were moving in unison at that time. And this is why you have my partner, Mos Def, Yassine Bey, becoming the host of Def Poetry Jam later on, because Russell Simmons had found a poet from Philly that he liked, Black Ice, and he was so impressed by this young man's talent, he developed a whole sort of poetry thing. And then, you know, you had this movie Love Jones come out, where Lorenz Tate is a poet in the movie. And, you know, the style of poetry that started with Sonia Sanchez and Gil Scott Heron in them, it's now mainstream. And it's part of, it had his rise at the same time the type of hip hop I was doing had his rise.
So just to follow up on that. So really you now have this blurring of boundaries between poetry and music and performance. Can you talk about how do you as an artist go about creating that? What is your process? So they influence you, but what is your process as an artist? I mean, when you decide to compose poetry or music, and how does the place you are affect that? Talk about the importance of geography.
Yeah, place is very important to me, but for me, it depends on each song and each project. Every song in this project has a different. I mean, I certainly have patterns, probably identifiable patterns, but I mean, every song is created in a different way in my mind. But yeah, certainly geography is very important. I always try to put myself, and you know what? That's not true. It is true, but to a larger degree, vibe is important. And that's why the book is called Vibrate Higher. I find it easier to get myself in the right vibe. Maybe if I travel to a place, you know, I talk about traveling to Puerto Rico or traveling to Jamaica, certain places to record music. But even in my new album that's coming out right now with Diamond D, it's called Gotham. It's about New York, but it's about old New York. So, you know, some of that I wrote just being in New York and listening to the clang of the train and the sounds of the different religious calls, calling people to prayer, and just everything you hear in the city. You know, every song, every project has a different sort of origin story.
Which is a nice segue to something I want to read that's on page 177 in your book. Mm-hmm. You're talking about train of thought and how you form that. And you said, the first words on Africa Dream are from a Zimbabwean proverb, because African proverbs are in many ways the first hip hop lyrics. And immediately I thought about the griot. What were your thoughts behind that?
I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. For me, hip hop is not something that is new. Hip hop is something that is ancient. We just are calling it hip hop in this era and time. Um, the idea that through rhythm and later words and poetry, there's syncopation and saying the right things to the right beat, and from the talking drums to what they started calling Negro spirituals, to scatting and jazz, to the last poet, to Gil Scott Heron, um, to Dolomite and some of that black exploitation stuff, to now hip it's always been signifying monkey, all that stuff. It's always the dozens. All of it is hip hop. Psalms in the Bible, all of it is hip hop. Just couplets of words.
Built on, it's a legacy. You're talking about the legacy.
Yeah.
They provide the foundation for hip hop.
Yeah, it's just what hip hop is, just what all of that is called right now.
Okay.
But oppressed people have always found a way to do that, or people who need to get a message out have always found a way to do that. Whether it was a proverb, those proverbs were said to drums or said to the pace of drumming. What is that but a rap?
So going back to rapping and all this being hip hop, talk about activism. That has been really a major part of your life. I remember at one point you resisting the term being called socially conscious, but you do consider yourself an activist now, which is maybe slightly different. Talk about your activism and how that informs your work.
Well, I've never resisted being called socially conscious. I've always embraced it, but I have pushed back against the idea that if you're socially conscious, that somehow you're soft or defanged, or somehow your work has less relevance, or somehow you can't be as aggressive or as talented or as competitive as some of the rappers in the space. And so I've definitely poked my chest out a little bit with my social consciousness, in terms of approaching in the hip hop space. But what's very accurate about what you said is I was very clear to delineate between being a socially conscious rapper or socially conscious artist and an activist. Just because I'm rapping all the good words and all the good things doesn't mean I'm doing all the good deeds. Just because I'm saying the community, just because I'm speaking things that the community can relate to, doesn't mean I'm participating in the most efficient or healthy way in my community. And so I was very clear to people call me an activist. Say, well, no, I'm a rapper. I'm here to entertain. But let me point you to the actual activists, and let me uplift them, and let me use my platform to tell you about the people who are actually doing the work. And it wasn't until Trayvon Martin, the 1-2 punch of Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown being murdered in the way that they were, that I really started to maybe think I should dabble in some, like, not dabble and take the lead on some activist work. For my whole career, I've always gone to protests, gone to marches, shown up at activist events, lent my voice and my talent when I could, donated stuff when I could. I've always done that. But I've never been someone who has taken the lead in any of those things. And I attempted to do that in a couple of ways in those years, 2014, 2015, 2016. I was very much more active. In 2017, in 2017, I went not to the White House because I couldn't get near the White House, but I went to D.C. I protested in the streets for a week because I was so upset at what Donald Trump was saying and what he was doing. And I laughed because I really was trying to take the lead. And I see why people don't do that, because it was one of the hardest things I did. There's been a lot of criticism of me online, and a lot of pushback, and there's been a lot of consequence for me doing that type of stuff, for me to step up in my activism. And looking at it in retrospect, I'm like, wow, when I started doing that more, it's like I got a lot more enemies. It was very, it was very like, I went through some things. I went through feeling like, I went through feeling alone in some of that stuff. And it was very hard to center myself and get to the place where you're like, you're not doing this for cookies. You're not doing this for any reward. You're doing this because it's the right thing to do.
It goes, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about John Oliver Killens always
Mhm.
talked about the social responsibility of an artist. And there are some people who resist that. I'm just going to be an artist.
Mhm.
You know, if I want to do something that's going to socially impact people, that's fine. But I don't want to call myself, I don't have a responsibility. I only have a responsibility to myself. And it seems to me that you've grown to say that because of your place where you are, do you see yourself as having a social responsibility as an artist, as someone who's a leader? And before you talk that, just to go back to the point you made about that tension you were feeling, you know, when you do go out there, the consequences of that, has that impacted how you see yourself as an artist?
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as the consequences, it just makes me want to move different. It doesn't shift my politics or shift my beliefs. It just makes me be like, okay, I can do this smarter. I can do this in a way that's not as harmful to myself. I could figure out a better way to do this. As far as that quote that you just read, I completely relate to and agree with that quote. And it's a great question that you asked because I spent a lot of time thinking about the answer to that question. And for me, I have a responsibility as a man. I have a responsibility as a human being and as a man who has the honor and the privilege of being raised in a house of educators. And because I was raised in a house of educators, well, I don't have an excuse for not knowing better. I have a privilege of being raised to know certain things and to be exposed to certain things. So because I have that privilege, well, I would be a jerk if I misused that privilege or if I didn't use that privilege to try my hardest to bring social awareness to my music and to use my music and my platform in this way. Now, do I feel like that's my responsibility as an artist? Inherently, no, I do not. I do not think. I think it's unfair to put that on artists. Um, I think that if, but I do think that's a responsibility of us as human beings to do that for each other. And you're a human being before you're an artist. So there's an interesting paradox there. So the caveat is you have to know first. It's only a problem if you know and you don't do better. Most of the artists that get criticized in this way, this criticism is levied at young hip hop artists more than it's levied at anybody else. And that's uh, a form of white supremacy as well. You don't hear people talking about country music artists, white artists, rock and roll artists, pop artists, about how they use their platform to help their community. No one cares. As long as they entertain, it's completely fine. They could go their whole career and they'll get lifetime achievement awards, never having done a conscious song, never had a state made one conscious statement, never did anything, just lived their life being a free, great artist. And I think that's fine. I don't judge no one who lives like that. But hip hop artists, they're like, well, what are the rappers doing for the community? What are the rappers doing? And it's not even all the hip hop. It's not even the DJs or the program directors, it's just the rappers, right? So and it's like, okay, well, if you look at disproportionately, rappers are young, extremely young. I'm talking about starting in their teenage years, young people from broken homes, toxic situations, people who grew up in poverty. That's just, a fact that rappers have a disproportionate amount of people who are poor people of color who grew up in poverty. Well, how can we expect people to speak about things that they've never been exposed to? How can we expect people to speak about, if you look at someone like 50 Cent, his parents are drug dealers, so he raps like that. My parents are professors, so I rap like this. It's very clear.
Believe it or not, we're almost at a close. And as we close out, two questions. What message do you have to a young three? If you
Mhm.
can bring this all together.
Okay.
Why vibrate higher?
Mhm.
Why did you choose to call this Vibrate Higher?
Well, let's start.
What
Let's start.
message?
Can we do one by one?
Sure.
Okay. Vibrate higher is because I feel like what's been rewarding for me as a human being is to try to figure out what my best self is and try to head towards that.
And tell us what message do you have for young MCs or young hip hop artists? And I'm distinguishing between rappers and hip hop artists.
Oh, look at
That's
you. um, the best thing I can say is please teach me. Please show me what the new hot things are. Please show me new ways uh, to get free from this system. because I think the young artists are in a way where the music industry that I grew up with doesn't exist for them. And so they have to figure out things on their own. And because they're figuring out things on their own, please share what you figure out with us older artists.
Now old school. And tell us
Yeah.
future projects and People's Party. Tell us about People's Party. The People's Party with Talib Kweli.
Yeah, People's Party is the world's best podcast, besides this one, of course. And shout out to my co-host Jasmine Lee and my partners at Uprocks, which is, good partners to have. And I'm excited. We have this month is going to be explosive with the guests that we have.
What was the genesis behind that? Why People's Party?
Jared Myers, the guy who started Raucous Entertainment. He got out of the music business. He started a company called Uprocks, sort of a lifestyle website for people who are into hip hop. And a couple of years ago, he said that his favorite thing in business that he's done is work with me. So he said, I've been thinking about projects I want to do. So he said, would you be interested in doing a podcast? I said, sure. I said, I would do a podcast. I would make sure I would have a female host, and I would make sure that I would call it People's Party. And the podcast would be me creating a safe space for artists to feel comfortable, my peers and people that I respect and people that inspire me, to feel comfortable to really share their stories and to really build on a legacy of remember the show This Is Your Life?
This Is Your Life. That was many years ago.
Many years ago, yes. I wasn't around when that was.
Okay, I said I didn't know.
Yeah. I saw reruns. This Is Your Life, also Gil Noble, Like It Is. So it's Like It Is Gil Noble Is Your Life, and it's that's what I'm trying to do in this new era.
Congratulations on that. And you're using the skills of investigative journalism.
I am. I'm enjoying being a journalist. It's a good time.
So thank you so much, Talib, for taking the time, and congratulations on your book. I want to encourage our listening audience to go out and purchase Vibrate Higher, by Talib Kweli, a rap story, Vibrate Higher rap story. And you can get that at Kweli Club. You can get that on in the Kweli Club. .com. Is it kwaliclub.com?
Yep, you can get it wherever fine books are sold.
Right, and also support our independent Black bookstores.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. Literally,
no, there's a metaphor there.
And figuratively.
Yes, there's a metaphor there. Okay, Talib Kweli, student or seeker of truth and knowledge.
You gave me that name. You gave me that name.
Right.
This is all because of you.
That's right. Okay. So you have been listening to Writers on Writing with your host, Dr. Brenda Greene. And remember, the writer is always reading, the reader is always writing. Keep reading and writing. This Medgar Evers College broadcast was paid for by Medgar Evers College. Write me at writers@mec.cu.edu. And please visit the Center for Black Literature, because you'll have an opportunity to listen to Talib in an interview with another journalist, Akiva Solomon, and he'll be talking about his books. So thank you so much, Talib.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Okay.
How was that?